Aside from that, there's not really much more to it. Tune in next week for the second part of this series, Defending Players. Thank you for watching.
What? What the fuck?
Welcome to part 2 of SlayerofMidgets Racing Academy, Defending. First, let's quickly recap on what we covered in the first episode though. We learned how to keep up with the player in front of us, and we also covered some of the basic tuning and difficulty settings. So now, defending players. I'm also going to include Overtaking here, partly because this is a 3 and not a 4-part series, and also because this planned 3-week series has taken nearly 4 weeks for me to upload the second part. There's reasons for that aside, but I digress. Anyway, defending. This is actually the hardest part I found to make. Defending players behind me doesn't really come naturally to me, so I've actually really quite struggled to make this video. Along with that, fighting in any race in this game is always so dynamic of a thing, and it happens so differently in every single encounter. Put simply, it's going to be impossible for me to go through every single possible scenario and give you a solution. There's just too many. But I have a race I recorded a while back where I fended off a riding in a war wagon, which I can break down at the end, and, well, I have a few bits of wisdom we can add on also. So, let's get started. In order to know how we first approach defending players, we need to know two things. Firstly, your car and the car that you're defending against are a very important thing to know. You should know what they are. If not, yeah, maybe I should actually finish that review of every car in the game, shouldn't I? Yeah, that would be a good idea. That is almost finished, by the way. Get subscribed so you don't miss out. The other thing we need to know, though, is what the server's rules are. Now, all this is just what we should expect from the server. It should probably go without saying. I mean, Poop Socks has a slightly different driving style to somewhere like Black Flag 2. But the cars are almost always the deciding factor on how to defend. Now, in order to explain how we're going to defend players, I'm actually going to try and use a metaphor. Imagine an oval-shaped onion with your car slightly forward of the middle. The outmost layer of this onion is roughly 4 car lengths in front and behind. A player here does not need to worry about the player in front or behind of them. You're essentially safe. The only thing you're at risk at is a kamikaze bomb, which is something like this. What we can do to spot something like this happening is just watch their lines, and you can generally tell if they're going to try. Typically the racing line is the exact opposite of the best line for an attack. Like that. So it's quite easy to spot, and you can get an eye for it after a little while. If you think they will try, you do have a few choices. The fastest way to deal with a player trying a corner bomb like this is simply to take the same line as them. That way, the actual time that your car is exposed to a possible corner bomb is a lot lower. The only trouble with doing this is that it's a hell of a lot slower, so if the player can keep up with you, you are going to have problems, and you're going to actually give them a chance to spot what you're doing, so they could jump across to the other side of the track and get a far faster line, if they have the time. I should probably clarify, obviously this won't work if there isn't some kind of hard terrain in the way, like a wall or a barrier. If a player is determined to hit you and there's that not there, they'll just cut across the dirt. If there is time, something you could do is allow them to catch up to you. We don't want to make this obvious by like slamming on the brakes and and waiting for them, but just shift into the last gear and hold quarter throttle or something until they're within about a car's length of you, and ideally on the outside. The reason that we want to get them ourselves to as close a speed as possible is purely because if we're going at the same speed as them and they hit us, they're going to have far less of an effect on our vehicle. Also, it means that we aren't sacrificing too much control. Of course, we want to keep them on the outside of us. If they're on the inside, they're just going to turn us left into the wall and crash us off the track, so that's a problem. If they are stuck on our outside, that's generally good. We want to keep ourselves pretty much side to side with them, or just in front. Never try to keep your corner over a player's front, because that's a guaranteed way to get spun fast. If you're on the outside, there are a few things that you can do to help mitigate the situation. Firstly, I would avoid turning into them, and even if you've got the weight to push them around, it's almost always going to be a bad idea. If you have got the weight to push them around as well, and you're on the outside, you're probably just going to get thrown off the corner, so I would start by braking early. You could possibly cut inside given the opportunity, or manage to pull off a spin maybe, but really what we should be doing if we're stuck on the outside of a player coming into a corner is resorting to the skin of the onion, which is to go faster. A player who cannot keep up with you is far easier to defend than a player who can. I mean, I know it's a lot easier said than done, but simply put, it is the best defense there is. If you're going slow, the best way of defending is going to be by being directly in the way of the player. Now, what do I mean by being in the way though? Well, let's go back to that onion. Now we're on the very last layer, and simply all we're going to do by being in the way is forcing the player to change their line in order to pass you. People tend not to take kindly to doing things like this, but so long as we're careful with how we do it, we can be annoying but not too aggressive. This kind of defending only works while you're very close to the other player, and ideally on the inside line. Although here we can see it worked, mainly because of my car's obscene power. In any other car I'd still be fighting for the position by the end of the lap. Remember one thing though. In a server with rules, it is the driver overtaking's job to make sure that the overtake is done within the rules. If the player you're passing decides to defend you and crashes themselves out, that's on them. And just for the record, me saying that is not some kind of a gotcha for not having to follow the rules in any server. As I've already pointed out, defending is such a diverse thing that we just cannot go into all of its complexities in a single video. But I have a race I recorded around a year or so ago, and it demonstrates some fairly fast and very aggressive defending. Let's give this a watch and I'll explain how and why I defend how I do. Coming into the first turn, I'm going to stay very centred in the track. This is for two reasons. One, this pushes the player on my right further inside of the corner, which is going to force him to either ram me, which is pretty likely considering there's an entire lobby behind us, or brake a lot earlier. The other reason is that if we get stuck on the outside in the first corner, we are almost guaranteed to get caught in the first turn crashes. We shift early to use my car's torque down the hill, and I grab some of the handbrake. I'm already going faster than the rider on my right, and I've got him on my outside corner. By grabbing the handbrake like this, we start the car rotating, and then we can grab some actual brakes, which will help point the car far quicker. This will also give us a few more milliseconds to plan the exit for the turn. If this rider's on my inside, I'm going to have to push him to the left and then dart right into the split of the track. I'm always going to try and go right into the split on this track because it's a lot faster. If he's directly behind me, it'll give me a chance to ignore him. In fact, he may even give me a little bit more acceleration. I just need to be careful if he bumps me or not going into the slaloms. And if he's on my right, I'm going to have to brake early or risk a huge crash coming into the slalom. As I said, I would cover overtaking in this video a bit. I've decided actually that I'm going to make it into its own video, but I will cover it a little bit here as well. Separate of this series, that video will be. So we shift early again to get more acceleration into the downhill, and we start doing exactly what we don't want the rider to have done to us. We're going to bump the razor gently, and then I'm actually going to back off so he can't see when I brake for the turn coming up. These corners are really hard to judge, and while a player can easily get through them, all of these little bumps and effects that I've done to them hopefully should be enough to put him off and make him either crash or mess up his line coming through the first slaloms, giving me a chance to overtake. It's very easy to get bunched up through these slaloms, and you need to be really careful because you can cause crashes very easily. That was a pretty rough overtake. I'm in Black Flag 2 here, so I'm not allowed to actively try and crash him out, but it would have been very easy for me to have in that situation. We see the player in the Razor is actually now in a far better line than me, and he's going a bit faster too. So what I'm going to try and do is get the front of my car just around this first slalom as quickly as possible, so he can't push me left into the wall. I will be hitting his front doing this and forcing him wide, which is going to be very risky for him. If he crashes through this section of slalom, it's going to stop the entire race behind me and will leave the entire track and race free for me to take the win. That went quite a lot better than it could have, to be honest. It looked fairly sketchy for a moment. When that Razor got pinged out to the left, I thought he was actually going to crash. Wanting to fight with players, I'm actually going to drive deliberately slowly by sitting fairly low in the power band. This way I can watch the players behind me, and when they start closing down on me, I can drop down a gear and start going again. Harry Potter took second place in his ride, and at the time I can remember fighting with Harry and him being a very fast player. So while I have a little bit of time, I'm actually going to get as much speed onto this finishing straight as possible. This is actually going to be the only place that I'm going to be able to put any good time on him, and I'm going to have to resort to just some of the most aggressive defending that I can for the rest of the race in order to keep first. And almost exactly a lap later, he's next to me. The first thing that I can do to help defend against him is to make the track that he has to drive on as long as possible. The last corner is going to be a right-hand turn, which he will be on the inside for, so I need to get as far ahead now while I can. I'm going to do this by moving right as far on the track as I reasonably can, without losing too much time. We're going to be putting a lot of distance on the rest of the lobby. Me and Harry are quite a bit faster than this lobby at the moment, but potentially I could slow a player down to where they would need to defend from the players behind. Although, with how easily Harry has gone through the pack last lap, it's probably not going to help. What I'm going to need to do is go fast. In a server where I'm allowed to spin players, all I would do here is just simply the same thing that I'm doing now, by going as far right as possible, but I would be driving deliberately a little slower, forcing him to try and overtake soon, or let me put distance on him on the straight. Given that spin I described didn't work, and I didn't lose too much time, I should still be pretty close to him by the end of the straight, and this would certainly be within corner bombing range. Forcing him wide was more than enough, as it turns out. The last corner can be taken flat out, so there's no chance that he's going to be able to get an overtake if I take the racing line here. Well, at least for the first two corners. Transitioning between a good defensive line and a good racing line are crucial to maintaining a fast lap time while defending. And as we covered, the best kind of defense is by going fast. I began turning slightly too early and had to straighten out the car or risk understeering into the wall on the exit of the corner. This has made me a lot slower than Harry is, but we do have an advantage here. How do we have an advantage? Well, we're going slower, we're in a heavier car, and we're coming onto a straight. Yeah, it doesn't seem like we have an advantage, but we do. We have the shadows, our ears, and experience. All of these tell us that Harry is going to be taking the best racing line he can to maximise his speed out of the corner. This is obvious, he's racing for first place, and we can hear him directly behind us and see his shadow to confirm that he is actually in a good place for an overtake. I'm going to deliberately make it seem like there's more room on the outside of the track for an overtake, and then as he begins to go wider to take that gap, I'm going to move over to the left side of the track with him. I'm far enough in front that he's not going to be able to spin me, so what he's going to end up doing is either pushing me down the track, or if he still has the excess momentum, he can try and swerve right and overtake, bleeding some of his speed off. And I can again follow him to the right side of the track as he does this. Commitment is going to be key to holding first place through the next corners. We came left as wide as possible coming into the first corner here. Given where Harry is, it will be impossible for him to stay on the inside line. So what I'm going to do is cut inside and brake at the exact same moment he does on the track. This way my car will, being heavier than his, block him relatively effectively. My car's definitely going to end up being in front of him by the time he starts his rotation by doing this, and this is going to spoil his line, giving me a chance to get ahead again. We actually got quite a bit further ahead than I thought we would. Our acceleration out of this corner is guaranteed to be better, but I don't want it to be. Harry has a tendency to fall slightly out of view and then come up again very quickly, making defending him quite hard without watching him obsessively. So what I'm going to do is slow down a bit in this straight so that I can stay basically side by side with him coming into the next corner. This way I'll be able to use the tail of my car to throw him wide and then run away as fast as possible. I'm only going to gain a couple of seconds from it, but this is what I need, otherwise I'm not going to make it through the slaloms without risking him passing me, and certainly exiting the slaloms is going to be horrendously difficult with him all over me. Well, that didn't work out now, did it? We're side by side coming into the slaloms. It is possible to get two cars through these slaloms side by side, and I'm going to commit to it, despite being in the heavier car and on the outside. I'm going to have to be very forceful with Harry if he commits too wide through here though, so I do need to be extremely careful not to crash him out or to get myself crashed out. Thankfully he didn't commit into the slalom with me. I expect he's hoping to get a chance to pass where I was slow last lap after the two turns that we're going to go through here. So what I'm going to do is just take them flat out. After all, I know I can, and if I crash, we'll both be stopped dead anyway. A dirty player could simply bump me into these corners that we're coming into now, and I'd probably crash, although if they would be able to get around me then, it's impossible to say. We're going to do the exact same thing as we did this time last lap, and we're going to see how the situation evolves. Because we're closer to Harry, we can actually control how he acts a little bit more. By using far more of the track than we actually need to as well, we should be able to keep him behind us. Him letting off the power there told me that he was going to try and cut inside of the corner again, so I looked back and tried to check how he's going to try and pass me. Thankfully he messed up his line and he's actually going the same speed as me now. I need to now be careful that he doesn't try and do exactly what I did last lap. I'm going to counter that by, rather than going wide like he did, go as tight as possible into the turn. And as he starts his turn in, I'm going to try and kick the tail out. Hopefully this will clip his front corner on the flat of my rear, which will make him go much wider. And relax. Both of us committing into that corner was just never going to work out. That late in the race though, you might as well try anything. This was an excellent battle, and I really hope this video has helped teach you a little bit about defending. There is some news though. If you read the thumbnail for this video, you know why it's so late. I am now the owner of a Honda C50 Super Cup. Actually, I've owned it for a while, it's just been on the other side of the country. And I've had an engine, where I live, in Wales, to fit in it, but it's been here, bike's been over there. I've now brought them together. I have plans to upload a video, potentially even a series of me fixing this bike up, and then I have the idea of getting up to some obscene shenanigans on it. My brother and I love to ride together, and potentially I may have plans to take it from here in Wales to the tip of India, Africa and Argentina, but for now this is just a dream of mine. We'll see how it plays out in the next, well, near future. Anyway, on that note, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Part 3, Destroying Players, will be out shortly.